Alright, let's get talking about a brief history of solfege and inadvertently music notation. The person we're going to be talking about is Guido D'Arezzo, Guido of Arezzo, a city in Italy, who was born around the year 993 and died somewhere after 1033. Finding out about Guido and his history is quite tough because at some point he becomes a monk, he's off the radar, and keep in mind this is all over 1,000 years ago. So everything that I'm going to tell you was a compilation of various sources of information, and everything that overlapped the most is what you're going to get out of this class. So Guido, his Italian name, or Guy as the French would have referred to him, was an Italian music theorist, and he is regarded as the inventor of modern staff notation. And also, as part of this notation, solfeggio, as it was originally called, or as we know it, solfege. Solfege is a form of solmization, which is the idea of taking syllables and attaching those syllables to various notes within a musical scale. So Guido, a young Italian at the time, was getting fed up with the idea that all music was required to be learned through oral tradition. A teacher would sing a song, a class was expected to memorize it, and come in the following day and pick up where things left off. Wanting to create some sort of system to remedy this sort of binary way of memorizing music, he later found himself becoming a monk so that he would have the freedom to explore his studies further. In 1013, he became a teacher at Pomposa Abbey, but many of his colleagues that he was working with at the time began to resent him because of this novel teaching method that he was using with his students. Simply the idea of creating a music notation system wasn't exactly so well received at the time. In 1025, he eventually moved to the Italian city Arezzo, giving him his name Guido D'Arezzo, Guido of Arezzo. Under the patronage of Bishop Tedald of Arezzo, he eventually taught singers at the Arezzo Cathedral. So there's a famous Latin hymn called Ut queant laxis, and it's believed that it's possible that Guido D'Arezzo either created this melody or used an existing melody to create this hymn. It's pretty unclear based on the sources that I've been reading, but it's a very important hymn, because each line of the hymn starts with a specific syllable that was used to create the early stages of solfeggio. Originally starting with ut, re, mi, fa, sol, la, and si to an extent, we were able to create most of what we have now as a major scale. Now I say to an extent because ut, re, mi, a lot of these syllables are part of a word, the first part of a longer word, and you'll be seeing this in a moment. Whereas si was used from a combination of two words, one having a J, Johannes. So it's up to you to sort of see this connection, but I think it's a little bit of a stretch, but it got us there. It got us to this do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si. So what's pretty cool is that the first line, starting with ut, actually starts on do. And the next line, starting with re, actually starts on re, the second scale degree. So ut, he floats around, re, he floats around, and each successive line is going to start with that next solfege syllable. So he essentially created something called a hexachord, which was used very much in music during the medieval times, which in this case was just the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, the first 6 notes of a musical scale. Eventually, si was also introduced, and as you probably have guessed at this point, ut later becomes do, and si later becomes ti. My guess in part is that C, S-I, would have been very confusing with the letter C in Western music notation, so it would have been a necessary adaptation. This now leaves us with solfeggio having become what we now know as solfege, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, and variations of this solfege to give us different church modes. Church modes are essentially just variations of scales, and if you want to learn more about modes, I would recommend looking more into it as it is a very deep and fundamental concept. So I've explained a little bit about ut queant laxis, but I want you to be able to hear it and see what I'm talking about, how each line takes a little piece of a syllable to start that line, whether it's a piece of a word or a very short word, it ends up giving us this ut, re, mi, fa, sol, la, and to some extent, si. So here it is, ut queant laxis. I did have to search the internet to find the right permissions to be able to use this, so you now have it accessible to you. And before I sort of sign off by showing you this final video, I just want to mention that having researched Guido D'Arezzo, there's actually a lot of fun like animated videos, and while this is something I don't excel at, some other people have done a very good job. So what I'm saying is if you want to study this further, there's lots of resources online. For now, let's jump into ut queant laxis. Here it is.
Ut queant laxis resonare fibris mira gestorum famolituorum solve polluti labire
So there it is, ut queant laxis. I hope you enjoyed that. There's the history lesson, and I'll see you in the next class.